I have lived in the same house for 42 years. The smart lock my son installed last spring was supposed to make things easier. He said it would keep me safe. I stood on my own porch that October evening, suitcase in hand, and the code I had memorized no longer worked. The keypad blinked red. 4 digits. The same 4 digits I had entered 1,000 times since March. I tried again, slower this time, my arthritic fingers pressing each number with deliberate care. Red light. Access denied. My house. My porch. The door I had painted sage green in 1987, the year Robert proposed, beneath the maple tree that still stood in the front yard, its leaves now scattered like old promises across the walkway. I knocked. The sound was small against the October wind. Inside, I could see the warm glow of the living room lamp, the one with the brass base that had belonged to Robert's mother. Someone was home. My son. His wife. The people I had invited to stay with me 6 months ago when their apartment building raised the rent beyond what they could afford. I knocked again. Harder this time. No answer. My phone felt heavy in my coat pocket. I pulled it out, fingers trembling now, not from the cold but from something else, something that felt like the first crack in a frozen lake. I called my son's number. It rang 5 times. Voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I called his wife, Karen. Voicemail. I stood there for 11 minutes. I know because I counted them. The way I used to count the minutes when my children were small and late coming home. The way I counted the minutes in the hospital waiting room when Robert's heart stopped the first time and then, 3 years later, the second time, the final time. 11 minutes on my own porch. And no one came to the door. I was supposed to be gone another week. The trip to see my sister in Vermont had been planned for months. A rare chance to visit before the hard winter set in and made the drive impossible. But Eleanor had caught a respiratory infection, and though she insisted I stay, I could see she needed rest more than company. I had left 2 days early, eager to sleep in my own bed, to sit in Robert's chair by the window and watch the birds at the feeder I had filled before I left. The feeder was empty now. I could see it from the porch, swaying slightly in the wind, nothing inside. I tried the code one more time. Red light. Something shifted inside me then, a quiet rearrangement of understanding that I would spend months trying to put into words. I had not been locked out. I had been locked out intentionally. The code had been changed while I was away, and no one had told me, and no one was answering my calls, and the lights were on inside my house, and someone was choosing not to open the door. I thought about knocking again. I thought about calling out, about pressing my face to the window like some desperate stranger. But I was not a stranger. I was Margaret Ann Sullivan, 73 years old, widow, mother of 2, grandmother of 1, owner of this house free and clear since 1994. I picked up my suitcase. I walked back down the porch steps, the same steps Robert had carried me up on our wedding night, the same steps my children had taken their first wobbly journeys down, the same steps I had swept and salted and repaired for 4 decades. My car was still warm from the drive. I sat inside it, parked in my own driveway, and I watched my house. The lights stayed on. No one came to the window. No one opened the door. I slept in my car that night. Not because I had nowhere else to go. My neighbour Barbara was only 3 houses down, and she would have welcomed me without question. My granddaughter Lily lived 40 minutes away in an apartment cluttered with art supplies and good intentions. I had options. I had people who loved me. But I stayed in the car because I needed to understand what was happening, and I could not understand it anywhere else but here, in my driveway, watching the house that had been mine for longer than my son had been alive. The seats did not recline far enough for comfort. My back ached within an hour. My breath fogged the windows, and I had to crack them open to keep the glass from frosting over, which meant the cold crept in, slow and patient, settling into my joints the way it always did now that I was old enough for the weather to matter. I did not sleep much, I thought. I thought about the 6 months since my son and his wife had moved in. I thought about how I had given them the guest room, the one with the good light, the one I had been planning to convert into a reading nook once I found the energy. I thought about the dinners I had cooked, the grocery bills I had paid, the electricity and water and internet I had never asked them to contribute to. I thought about the small things I had ignored, the way Karen rearranged my kitchen cabinets without asking, the way my son stopped saying thank you and started saying, "This is how we do things now." The way my belongings had been slowly migrating from the common areas into my bedroom, as if I were the guest and not the host. I thought about the power of attorney I had signed in March. That memory came back to me slowly, the way pain sometimes does, arriving in waves rather than all at once. I had been sick in March, a bad flu that had turned into pneumonia, that had put me in the hospital for 4 days and left me weak for weeks afterward. My son had visited me in the hospital. He had been concerned. He had been attentive. He had brought papers, just in case, he had said. "So I can help you with things while you recover. The bank, the doctors, whatever you need." I had signed because I was tired and sick, and he was my son, and I trusted him. I had signed because what kind of mother does not trust her own child? The sun came up around 6:30, grey and reluctant, the way October mornings often are in this part of the country. I watched it lighten the sky above my house, watched the upstairs bedroom light turn on, and then off. I watched the kitchen window glow with the particular warmth of coffee being made. They were in there, living their morning, in my house, with my things behind my locked door. I started the car. The engine turned over on the first try, reliable as always, and I sat there for a moment with my hands on the wheel, feeling the vibration move through my palms, up my arms, into the hollow space beneath my ribs where something new was growing. Not anger, not yet. Just the first small no taking root. Barbara Hensley had been my neighbour for 28 years. She was the one who brought casseroles when Robert died. She was the one who sat with me on the porch when I did not want to be inside but did not want to be alone. She was the one who never asked questions when I needed silence and always knew when I needed to talk. I drove the 3 houses down to her driveway because my legs were stiff. And my pride was already wounded enough without limping down the sidewalk at 7 in the morning with my overnight bag. She opened the door before I knocked. She must have seen me coming. Her face told me what I looked like before I could find a mirror. Concern first, then confusion, then something harder. Something protective that I had seen in her eyes only a handful of times in nearly 3 decades. She did not ask what happened. She pulled me inside, sat me at her kitchen table and put the kettle on. The ritual of tea, I had learned over the years, was Barbara's way of making space for difficult conversation. It gave her hands something to do and gave me time to find the words. The words, when they came, sounded strange in my own ears. I told her about the lock, about the calls, about the night in the car. I told her about the 6 months of small surrenders I had not recognized until I was standing on my own porch with nowhere to go. Barbara listened without interrupting. When I finished, she set down her teacup with a careful precision that I recognized as controlled anger. "You need to call your bank," she said. The suggestion seemed strange to me. The bank had nothing to do with a lock and an unanswered door. But Barbara had been a legal secretary for 35 years before she retired, and she understood things about documents and access and the quiet ways people could be undone by their own signatures. I called the bank from Barbara's kitchen. The customer service representative was polite and efficient. She asked for my account number, my date of birth, my mother's maiden name. She verified my identity, and then she went quiet, for a moment too long. "There have been some changes to your account," she said. "What kind of changes?" I asked. A secondary authorized user was added in April. Account permissions were modified. There have been several large withdrawals over the past 3 months. My chest tightened. "How large?" I asked. The representative hesitated. "I should not be giving you this information over the phone," she said. "You should come into a branch and speak with a manager directly." I thanked her. I hung up. I sat at Barbara's kitchen table and felt the room tilt slightly, the way it does when you realize that the ground you have been standing on is not as solid as you believed. Barbara did not say, "I told you so." She did not say anything at all. She simply refilled my tea and waited. "The power of attorney," I said finally. I gave him access to everything. Barbara nodded. She had suspected as much. She had probably suspected more than I was willing to admit even now, sitting in her kitchen with my world quietly collapsing around me. "I need to see Lily," I said. "My granddaughter. My son's daughter from his first marriage, the one that ended badly when Lily was only 7. She had grown up mostly with her mother, but she and I had stayed close in the ways that matter. Phone calls, birthday dinners, the kind of love that does not need daily maintenance to remain strong. Lily was 26 now, an artist who taught community college classes to pay the rent, who lived in a small apartment cluttered with art supplies and good intentions. She was the only person in my family I could trust completely. Barbara offered to drive me, but I needed the 40 minutes alone. I needed time to think, to feel, to let the shape of what was happening settle into something I could understand. The drive took me past the bank, where I had held my accounts for 31 years. I did not stop. I was not ready yet. I needed to know more before I could act, and I could not know more until I understood how deep this betrayal went. Lily's apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old brick building that had once been a textile mill. The stairs were steep, and my knees protested, but I climbed them anyway. One hand on the worn wooden railing, counting the steps the way I counted so many things these days. She opened the door with paint on her fingers and confusion in her eyes. She had not been expecting me. She had not known I was coming home early. She had not known anything was wrong, I told her. The telling took an hour, maybe more. Lily made coffee while I talked, thick and strong the way her mother used to make it, and she listened with the same intensity she brought to her paintings, absorbing every detail, every small humiliation, every piece of the puzzle I had not wanted to see. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said the thing I had not been able to say to myself. "He stole from you," she said. "My father stole from you." The word sat in the air between us. Stole. Such a simple word for such a complicated thing. Because it was not just money, it was trust. It was 40 years of giving everything I had to a child who had grown into a man I no longer recognized. Lily's eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "What do you want to do?" she asked. "I want my house back," I said. "I want my accounts back. I want my life back." She nodded. "Then we need a lawyer." I had thought about calling my son. I had thought about driving back to the house, banging on the door, demanding explanations. I had thought about all the things a mother is supposed to do when her child does something wrong, the conversations, the second chances, the desperate hope that there has been some misunderstanding. But there was no misunderstanding. The lock had been changed while I was away, the calls had gone unanswered, the money had been moved without my knowledge. These were not accidents, these were choices. And the person who made those choices was not going to undo them just because I asked nicely. I stayed with Lily that night. She gave me her bed and slept on the couch despite my protests. I lay awake for hours, staring at the paintings that covered her walls, the explosions of colour she created from nothing, and I thought about what it means to make something new, to build, to rebuild. The lawyer's name was Grace Okonkwo. Lily had found her through a colleague at the college, someone who had gone through a difficult divorce and spoken highly of Grace's work. She specialised in elder law, which was a phrase I had never thought would apply to me, but now seemed perfectly, painfully appropriate. I called her office first thing in the morning. Grace Okonkwo's office was on the 4th floor of a building downtown that smelled like old wood and new paint. The elevator was slow, which gave me time to rehearse what I would say, though I had rehearsed it so many times already that the words had worn smooth in my mind like river stones. She was younger than I expected, mid-40s maybe, with close-cropped grey hair and glasses that sat low on her nose. Her handshake was firm, her smile was professional, and her office was filled with books and diplomas and photographs of people I assumed were grateful clients. "Tell me everything," she said. I told her the 3rd time now, and it was getting easier, the way wounds stop hurting as much once you stop trying to pretend they are not there. Grace took notes. She asked questions, sharp ones, that cut through the parts of the story I had been softening for my own protection. She asked about the power of attorney specifically, what I had signed, when I had signed it, whether I had read it completely before putting my name to it. I had not read it completely. I admitted this with the shame of a child confessing to a broken window. I had trusted my son, and I had signed where he pointed, and I had not asked what authority I was giving away, because what kind of mother questions her own child's intentions? Grace set down her pen. She looked at me the way Barbara had looked at me, the way Lily had looked at me, with a mixture of compassion and controlled fury that I was beginning to recognize as the appropriate response to my situation. What he has done may constitute financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, she said. In this state, that is both a civil and potentially criminal matter. The power of attorney you signed can be revoked. Your assets can be frozen. We can pursue both the return of any misappropriated funds and, if you choose, criminal charges. I sat with those words. Criminal charges against my own son. The son I had nursed through colic and chicken pox. The son I had driven to soccer practice and band rehearsals. The son whose college tuition I had paid by working double shifts at the hospital where I spent 32 years as a registered nurse. The son who had held my hand at Robert's funeral and promised to take care of me. That son. What do I need to do? I asked. Grace outlined the steps. First, a formal revocation of the power of attorney, which she could prepare immediately. Second, a visit to the bank to freeze all accounts and remove any unauthorized users. Third, documentation of everything, every withdrawal, every change, every piece of evidence that would support my case. Fourth, if the house deed had been altered in any way, a legal challenge to restore it to its proper state. She mentioned the house deed casually, as if it were just another item on a list. But I felt my stomach drop. The deed, I said. What do you mean, altered? Grace paused. She had assumed I knew. She had assumed that someone who had been locked out of her own home would have already discovered the full scope of what had been taken. I did not know. One of the things a power of attorney can authorize, she said carefully, is changes to property ownership. If your son used that authority to add himself to the deed or to transfer ownership entirely, that is something we will need to address immediately. I could not speak. The house. Robert's house. Our house. The place where I had raised 2 children and buried 1 husband and lived every moment of my adult life. The deed altered. Grace must have seen something in my face because her voice softened. We will find out, she said. And if it has been changed, we will challenge it. You are not without recourse here, Margaret. You have options. Options. I had spent 6 months not seeing what was in front of me, and now I had options. The revocation document took 20 minutes to prepare. I signed it with careful strokes, my handwriting steady in a way my heart was not. Grace notarized it herself, stamping the paper with a seal that felt like a lock being opened after years of being closed. My first real no. Not the small no that had been growing in the car that morning. This was a no with teeth. A no that would be filed with the county recorder's office. A no that my son would receive by certified mail within 3 to 5 business days. I asked Grace if there was a way to do it faster. She smiled, the first genuine smile I had seen from her. We can have it hand-delivered, she said. This afternoon, if you like. I liked. From Grace's office, I went to the bank. Not alone. Lily had insisted on coming, and I was grateful for her presence beside me as I walked through the doors of the institution that had held my money for 3 decades. The branch manager's name was Sandra Chen. She was professional and careful, explaining the changes that had been made to my accounts with a diplomatic precision that I suspected was designed to avoid any suggestion of the bank's own liability. My son had added himself as an authorized user in April, using the power of attorney. He had then made a series of withdrawals totaling $47,000 over the following months. He had also removed my name from one of the investment accounts entirely, transferring it to an account in his name alone. $47,000. I had worked for $47,000. I had worked nights and weekends and holidays. I had skipped vacations and put off retirements and made every small sacrifice a person makes when they are building something for later. And my son had taken it while I was recovering from pneumonia. Sandra Chen watched my face as I absorbed the numbers. I imagined she had seen this before, the particular devastation that comes from betrayal by family. She did not offer platitudes. She simply asked what I wanted to do. I want everything frozen, I said. I want his access removed immediately. I want a complete accounting of every transaction he has made using my accounts. She nodded. That will take some time to compile, she said. But we can freeze the accounts and remove his access today. Today. Another small victory, another brick in the wall I was building between my past self and my future one. Lily squeezed my hand under the table as Sandra processed the changes. The house looked different when I returned. Not physically, not in any way I could point to and name, but different in the way a place feels when you no longer belong to it, when the walls have been claimed by someone else, even though your name is still on the insurance, and your plants are still in the garden, and your husband's ashes are still in the urn on the mantel where you placed them 7 years ago. I did not go inside. I was not there to go inside. I was there to deliver papers. Grace had prepared the legal notice, the formal notification that the power of attorney had been revoked and that further use of it would constitute fraud. She had also prepared the initial documentation for a civil claim, the first step in recovering what had been taken. Both documents were in a manila envelope in my hand, and my hand was steady, and my heart was not. Karen answered the door, my daughter-in-law. The woman my son had married 3 years after his first marriage ended, the woman who had rearranged my kitchen and filled my refrigerator with foods I did not eat and turned my living room into something that felt more like a showroom than a home. She looked surprised to see me. Surprised and, beneath the surprise, something else. Something that might have been annoyance if it had not been so carefully controlled. "Margaret," she said, "I thought you were in Vermont." "I was," I said. "I came back early." She did not invite me in. She stood in the doorway, my doorway, with her body positioned to block entry, and her face arranged in an expression of polite confusion that I no longer believed. "I need to speak with my son," I said. "He is not here," she said. "He is at work." This was a lie. I knew it was a lie because my son had lost his job in August and had not told me, had let me believe he was still employed while he was spending my money and changing my locks and removing me from my own accounts. I knew this because Grace had done her research, had pulled together the pieces of a picture I had been too close to see. I did not argue with the lie. There was no point. Instead, I held out the envelope. "These are for both of you," I said. "Legal notice. The power of attorney has been revoked. Any further use of my accounts or my property will be prosecuted." Karen's face changed. The polite confusion melted away, replaced by something harder, something that I realized I had been seeing for months without recognizing it for what it was: contempt. "You are overreacting," she said. "We were just trying to help you. You have been so confused lately, so forgetful. We were protecting you." I stood very still. The October wind moved through the maple tree behind me, scattering leaves across the porch where I had once rocked my babies to sleep. I looked at this woman who had come into my home and taken everything she could reach, and I felt something I had not expected to feel: calm. "I am not confused," I said. "I am not forgetful. I am a 73-year-old woman who has been robbed by her own family, and I am done being quiet about it." Karen's mouth opened, then closed. She had not expected this. She had expected the mother she had known for 3 years, the one who accommodated, who compromised, who smoothed things over and kept the peace at any cost. That mother was standing on a different porch now, in a different life. "Take the papers," I said. She took them. Her hands were not steady the way mine were. I turned and walked back to my car. I did not look back. There was nothing behind me that I needed to see. The days that followed were strange and heavy. I stayed with Lily, sleeping on her pull-out couch because the bed made my back ache more than the couch did, eating the simple meals she cooked because neither of us had energy for anything elaborate. The silence was different than any silence I had known. It was not the silence of grief, which I understood from the years after Robert died. It was not the silence of loneliness, which I had learned to carry like an old familiar weight. It was the silence of waiting, of uncertainty, of not knowing what would happen next or how long it would take. My son did not call. Not that day, not the next day, not the day after that. I checked my phone more often than I wanted to admit, waiting for his name to appear, waiting for the conversation that would explain everything, that would reveal some misunderstanding I had missed, some excuse that would make this all make sense. The phone stayed silent. On the 4th day, Lily came home from teaching with her arms full of groceries and her face full of determination. "We need to get your things," she said. My things. The belongings I had left in the house when I went to Vermont. The clothes and books and photographs and all the small objects that make up a life. I had not been thinking about them. I had been too busy trying to understand the larger losses to notice the smaller ones. I cannot go back there alone, I said. Lily set down the groceries. You will not be alone, she said. I will be with you, and we will bring witnesses. Witnesses. The word seemed strange applied to retrieving my own belongings from my own home, but Lily explained that Grace had recommended it. Documentation, evidence, protection against any claims that I had damaged property or taken things that did not belong to me. We went the next morning. Lily and Barbara and a young man from Grace's office named Marcus, who carried a clipboard and a camera and spoke very little but took excellent notes. My son answered the door. He looked older than I remembered, though it had only been 2 weeks since I had seen him. There were circles under his eyes and a tension in his jaw that I recognized from his childhood, from the times he had been caught in a lie and was trying to calculate his way out of it. We are here for my belongings, I said. He did not argue. He stepped aside and let us in, and I walked through my own front door for the first time in 2 weeks, smelling the coffee that Karen had made that morning and the candles she had burned the night before, and, underneath it all, the faint trace of the home I had kept for 42 years. My things had been moved, packed into boxes, stacked in the basement, labelled in Karen's handwriting with a single word: junk. I stood in front of those boxes for a long moment. Robert's books, my mother's china, the quilt my grandmother had made for my wedding, the photographs of my children when they were small enough to fit in my arms. Junk. Lily touched my shoulder. Marcus took photographs. Barbara made a list. I picked up the first box and carried it out to the car. The mediation was held in a conference room at the county courthouse, a beige space with fluorescent lights and a long table and chairs that were not quite comfortable enough for the hours we would spend sitting in them. My son sat on one side with Karen and their lawyer, a man in a grey suit who shuffled papers with practiced efficiency. I sat on the other side with Grace and Lily, who had insisted on coming even though she was not required to be there. The mediator was a woman named Dr. Patricia Wells, a retired judge with silver hair and patient eyes, who had, I imagined, seen every version of family conflict that existed. "Let us begin," she said. What followed was not a conversation. It was 2 separate monologues delivered across a table, neither one touching the other. My son spoke first. He explained that he had been worried about me, that I had shown signs of cognitive decline, that he had taken steps to protect my assets because he feared I was vulnerable to exploitation. He produced documents, medical records from my hospitalization in March, statements from Karen about my forgetfulness, a letter from a doctor I did not remember seeing who suggested that I might benefit from cognitive evaluation. I listened. I kept my face still. I let him finish. Then Grace spoke. She presented the counter-evidence, my clean bill of health from my own physician, the testimony of Barbara and other neighbours who had observed me over the years, the documentation from the bank showing that the unauthorized withdrawals had been made into accounts controlled by my son, not into any kind of protective trust. She pointed out that the doctor's letter was from a physician who specialized in certifying mental incapacity and who had billed for services he had never provided. My son's lawyer objected. Dr. Wells asked him to wait his turn. The hours stretched on. Arguments were made and rebutted. Numbers were cited and disputed. At one point, Karen suggested that I had always been difficult, that I had never really accepted her, that this entire situation was a result of my refusal to recognize that my son had grown up and no longer needed me. I watched her say these things. I watched my son nod along as she spoke. He did not look at me. Not once in the 3 hours we sat in that room did he meet my eyes. By late afternoon, it was clear that no agreement would be reached. My son and his lawyer wanted me to drop the civil case and allow him to remain on the property deed in exchange for returning some of the withdrawn funds. I wanted full restoration of my property, full accounting of all misappropriated assets, and permanent removal of his access to any of my accounts or documents. Dr. Wells noted that the parties were unable to reach resolution, and across, she recommended that the matter proceed to a formal hearing. "We will see you in court," Grace said. It was not a threat. It was simply a statement of fact. I went back to the house one more time before the hearing. Alone this time. Not to retrieve anything. Just to see it. Lily had offered to come with me. Barbara had offered. Grace had suggested I bring documentation of the property's condition. But I needed to do this alone. I needed to stand in the space that had been mine for 4 decades and feel whatever I was going to feel, without witnesses. The key they had given me during the mediation, a copy made as a gesture of good faith that fooled no one, worked on the first try. The door opened. The house breathed out its familiar smells, paint and polish, and the faint ghost of Robert's pipe tobacco, that I swear still lingered in the walls even though he had quit smoking 15 years before he died. They were not home. I had timed my visit for when I knew they would both be out. My son at a job interview he had finally arranged, Karen at the gym where she went every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. The house was different. The furniture had been rearranged. The pictures on the walls had been changed. The kitchen, once the heart of my home, now looked like something from a magazine, all clean lines and organized spaces, and not a single sign that anyone actually cooked there. I walked through the rooms slowly. The living room, the dining room, the study where Robert used to sit and read, the bedroom we had shared for 38 years. Karen's things were everywhere now. Her clothes in my closet, her cosmetics on my dresser, her books on the nightstand where I used to keep my reading glasses, and the photograph of my wedding day. I picked up the photograph. It was in a box in the corner, the same box I had seen in the basement, the same word written on the side in Karen's handwriting: junk. I took the photograph with me when I left. The silence in the house was heavy, the kind of silence that presses against your skin and makes you aware of every breath you take. I stood in the kitchen and looked out the window at the garden, at the roses I had planted 15 years ago and tended every season since. They were overgrown now. No one had pruned them, no one had watered them. The blooms were gone and the canes were tangled, and the whole bed looked like something abandoned, something forgotten. I stood there for a long time, not crying. I had done my crying in Lily's apartment in the middle of the night when I thought she was asleep. I had cried for my son and for my marriage and for the life I thought I had built. I had cried until there was nothing left but this quiet standing, this witnessing of what had become of the place I loved. The house was silent. I was silent too, but my silence now was not the silence of someone who had been erased. It was the silence of someone who was choosing what to say next. I locked the door behind me and walked back to my car. The roses would wait. They had survived worse than neglect, and so I was learning, had I. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday in November, 3 weeks after the failed mediation. I spent those weeks preparing, not just the legal preparation, which Grace handled with meticulous care, but the personal preparation, the work of becoming the kind of person who could stand in a courtroom and tell the truth about her own son. I wrote letters that I did not send, pages and pages of letters to my son, explaining how I felt, asking why he had done this, offering forgiveness if only he would explain. I wrote them at Lily's kitchen table in the early mornings before she woke up, and I read them back to myself, and then I tore them up and threw them away. He did not want explanations. He did not want forgiveness. He wanted my house and my money and my silence, and he was not going to stop wanting those things just because I found the right words. I stopped writing to him. Instead, I started writing to Lily. Short notes at first, just observations about the day, things I noticed, things I remembered. The way the light came through her apartment window in the afternoons. The recipe for the soup my mother used to make, the one I had never written down and had almost forgotten. The story of how I met Robert at a dance in 1962, both of us too shy to speak, but somehow managing to find each other on the dance floor anyway. I wrote these things because I wanted her to have them, because I realized that all the years I had spent giving to my son, cooking and cleaning and paying and accommodating, I had neglected to give the things that mattered most, the stories, the memories, The small pieces of wisdom that I had collected over 73 years and never thought to share. I gave them to Lily instead. The courthouse was crowded on the day of the hearing. Not for my case, which was small and private and would be heard in a back room by a judge who had probably seen 100 cases just like it. Crowded because that was simply what courthouses were on Tuesday mornings in November, full of people with problems and papers and the desperate hope that someone in a black robe would tell them they were right. Grace had prepared me for what would happen. The judge would hear both sides, evidence would be presented, witnesses might be called, though in a civil matter like this, the documentation would likely speak for itself. At the end, the judge would make a ruling, either that day or within a few days. And that ruling would determine who owned my house and what happened to the money my son had taken. What she had not prepared me for was how it would feel, standing in that courtroom, looking at my son across the aisle, seeing the way he sat with his shoulders squared and his jaw tight. I felt something I had not expected. Grief. Not anger, though there was anger too, buried deep beneath the calm surface I had worked so hard to maintain. Not fear, though I was afraid of what the judge might decide, just grief. The pure, simple grief of a mother who had lost her child, not to death, but to something worse. Choice. He had chosen this. Every step of the way, he had chosen this. And I could not undo those choices, no matter how much I wished I could. The judge was a woman named the Honourable Catherine Park. She was small and precise, and she listened to both sides with an attention that felt almost uncomfortable in its intensity. My son's lawyer went first. He presented the same narrative from the mediation. A concerned son, a declining mother, protective measures taken in good faith. He produced the same documents, the same questionable medical opinions, the same arguments that had failed to convince Dr. Wells. Then it was Grace's turn. She was brilliant. She dismantled each claim with evidence I had not known she possessed. Bank records showing the timing and destination of every withdrawal, property documents showing the attempt to transfer ownership, testimony from my physician, from my neighbours, from a geriatric specialist who had evaluated me and found no signs of cognitive impairment. And then she asked if I wanted to make a statement. I had not planned to speak. The lawyers were supposed to do the speaking. That was what I had paid them for, what I had hired them to handle, so that I would not have to stand up in front of strangers and talk about the worst thing that had ever happened to me. But when Grace asked, I said yes. I stood up. I walked to the front of the courtroom. I faced the judge and I spoke. I have been silent for a very long time, I said. I was silent when my son moved into my home and started treating it as his own. I was silent when his wife rearranged my kitchen and my living room and my life. I was silent when I signed a document I did not fully understand because I trusted my child and I was sick, and I believed he was trying to help me. I was silent when I stood on my own porch with a suitcase in my hand, and the door would not open. I paused. The courtroom was very quiet. I was taught that silence is kindness, I continued, that a good mother gives and never asks for anything in return, that keeping the peace is more important than speaking the truth. I was taught that family forgives, that blood is thicker than water, that you do not air your dirty laundry in public. But I am standing here today because I have learnt something different. I looked at my son. He was finally looking back at me. Silence is not kindness when it allows people to hurt you. Forgiveness is not possible when the person who hurt you does not believe they did anything wrong. And family, real family, does not steal from you while you are sick and then lock you out of your own home when you try to come back. I am not confused. I am not forgetful. I am not too old to know what is happening to me. I am 73 years old. I worked for 32 years as a nurse. I raised 2 children and buried 1 husband and built a life in the house that your son is trying to take from me. I deserve better than this. I deserve to live my final years in peace, in my own home, with my own things, without fear that the people I trusted will take everything I have the moment I turn my back. I sat down. The courtroom stayed silent. The judge did not rule that day. She said she needed time to review the documentation, to consider the evidence, to make a decision that would hold up if it were appealed. She thanked both parties for their presentations and adjourned the hearing. We would have an answer within 72 hours. Those 72 hours were the longest of my life. I stayed with Lily, as I had been staying for weeks now. We cooked together and watched old movies and did not talk about what might happen if the judge ruled against me. We did not talk about where I would live if I lost my home, or how I would support myself if the stolen money was not returned, or what it would mean to spend my remaining years knowing that my son had won. We did not talk about these things because there was nothing to say. Either the judge would believe me or she would not. Either I would get my life back or I would have to build a new one from whatever pieces were left. On the morning of the 3rd day, Grace called. "The judge has issued her ruling," she said. "I think you should sit down." I was already sitting, but I understood what she meant. I braced myself for whichever version of the future was about to arrive. "The ruling is in your favor," Grace said. "Had full restoration of property, full return of misappropriated funds. Your son has been ordered to vacate the premises within 30 days and to have no further contact with you regarding financial or property matters." I could not speak. Lily was watching me, her face tight with fear. And I could not find the words to tell her what Grace had just told me. "Margaret," Grace continued, "you won. I won. 2 words that did not seem large enough to contain everything they meant. The house, the money, the validation that I was not confused, not forgetful, not too old to know what was happening to me. I won. Lily must have seen something in my face, because she crossed the room and wrapped her arms around me, and I let her hold me for a long moment before I could finally say the words out loud. "We are going home," I told her. The move back took a week. Not because there was so much to move, but because I wanted to do it slowly, deliberately, with the same care I would have used to tend a garden after a long winter. My son and Karen left 3 days after the ruling. They did not contact me. They did not apologize. They simply packed their things and drove away, and I learned later that they had moved to another state, to a city where no one knew what they had done. I did not try to find out more. I did not need to know where they were, or how they were doing, or whether they were sorry. That chapter of my life was closed, and I was done reading it. Lily helped me carry the boxes back in, the ones labelled junk, the ones containing everything I had built over 42 years. We unpacked them together, and I showed her where each item belonged. And I told her the stories behind the objects, the memories that had been almost erased, but not quite. "This was your great-grandmother's china," I said, lifting a cup that had survived 2 world wars and 3 cross-country moves. She brought it over from Ireland in 1904, wrapped in her wedding dress to keep it safe. Lily held the cup carefully, turning it in her hands. "And this," I said, picking up a small brass clock that had not worked in decades, "was the first gift your grandfather ever gave me. Before we were married, before we even knew we loved each other. He said it was so I would always have time for him." We spent hours like this, unpacking and remembering and placing each object back where it belonged. By evening, the house looked like mine again. Not exactly as it had been, because some things had been broken, and some things had been lost, and some things would never be quite the same, but mine. I changed the locks the next day. Not the smart lock my son had installed. I had that removed entirely, replaced with a simple deadbolt that required an actual key. A key I kept on a chain around my neck, close to my heart, where no one could take it without my permission. The garden took longer to restore. The roses had been badly neglected, and some of the canes had died back to the roots. I spent days pruning and mulching and watering, giving the plants what they needed to survive the winter and come back strong in the spring. Lily helped when she could, on weekends and evenings when she was not teaching. She had never been much of a gardener, but she was willing to learn, and I was willing to teach. "We are planting these together," I told her one Saturday afternoon, kneeling in the dirt with a new rosebush between us, "so that when I am gone, you will know how to take care of them." She looked at me with eyes that were suddenly wet. "You are not going anywhere," she said. I smiled. "Not yet," I said, "but someday. And I want you to have the roses when I do. I want you to have all of it, the garden, the house, the china and the clock, and all the stories I had not known how to share until now. I want you to have the life I almost lost." The first letter I wrote to Lily was about silence, not the silence of being ignored or overlooked or erased, the silence that comes after, the silence of a house that is yours again, of a garden waiting to bloom, of a life that has been reclaimed one small piece at a time. I wrote it sitting at the kitchen table on a Sunday morning, the same table where I had sat with Robert for 38 years, where I had fed my children and argued with my husband and made 1,000 decisions I could not take back. I told her what I had learned, that silence is not weakness unless you choose to make it so, that saying no is not the same as being selfish, that giving does not mean emptying yourself until there is nothing left. I told her about the price I had paid for this wisdom, a son I would probably never speak to again. Years I would not get back, trust I would have to learn to rebuild. But I also told her about what I had gained, the house, the garden, the certainty that I knew my own mind, that I was capable of standing up for myself, that I was more than a function, more than a service, more than a convenient source of money and space and silent compliance. I was Margaret Ann Sullivan, 73 years old, owner of a house, keeper of a garden, writer of letters to a granddaughter who deserved to know everything I had learned. And I was, finally, at peace. The days settled into a rhythm. Morning coffee by the window, lunch in the garden when the weather allowed, afternoons spent reading or writing or simply sitting in Robert's chair watching the light move across the walls. Lily visited every weekend. Sometimes she brought her art supplies and painted while I worked in the garden. Sometimes she brought groceries and we cooked together. Sometimes she just sat with me, the two of us in comfortable silence, needing nothing but each other's presence. Barbara came by often too. She had been my witness through the worst of it, and now she was my companion through the slow work of recovery. We drank tea on the porch and watched the seasons change and talked about nothing in particular, the way old friends do when they have already said everything important. I did not hear from my son. For months, nothing. No calls, no letters, no attempts at reconciliation. He had moved away and disappeared into a life I knew nothing about, and I told myself I was grateful for the silence. Then, one afternoon in March, my phone buzzed with a text message. I looked at the screen. His name. A message. "Mum, I know we need to talk. I made mistakes. Can we try again?" I stared at those words for a long time. Part of me wanted to answer. The mother part. The part that had spent 43 years loving this person despite everything. The part that remembered the baby I had held and the child I had raised and the man I had believed he would become. But another part of me, the part that had grown stronger over these months, knew better. He had not apologized. He had said he made mistakes, but he had not said he was sorry. He had asked if we could try again, but he had not acknowledged what trying again would require from him. And I was done doing the emotional work for people who would not do it for themselves. I read the message one more time, then I deleted it. Not because I did not care. I cared. I would probably always care. But caring did not mean I had to respond. It did not mean I had to open a door that I had finally learned to close. I put the phone down and went out to the garden. The roses were coming back. The canes I had pruned in the fall were pushing out new growth, tiny red leaves unfurling toward the spring sun. Some of the bushes would bloom this year. Others would need another season to recover. But they were alive. They had survived. I knelt in the dirt and felt the soil between my fingers, cool and damp and full of possibility. If you are reading this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you are the one who says yes when you mean no, the one who gives until there is nothing left, the one who has been so silent for so long that you have forgotten what your own voice sounds like, then I want you to know something. It is not too late. It is not too late to say no. It is not too late to set boundaries. It is not too late to reclaim what has been taken from you, even if it has been taken by people you love, especially if it has been taken by people you love. Your silence is not kindness. It is abandoning yourself. Your no is not selfishness. It is a reminder that you are a person, not a function. And your dignity is not something that is given to you by others. It is something you claim for yourself, one small decision at a time, one day at a time, one word at a time. No, I said it once, on a cold October morning, standing in my driveway with nowhere to go, and it changed everything. The sun was setting when I finished in the garden. I washed my hands at the kitchen sink, looking out the window at the roses and the maple tree, and the porch where Robert had carried me on our wedding night. My house, my garden, my life. I sat down at the table and picked up my pen. I had another letter to write.